Hello and welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a returning guest with us, Brian Groves. Brian is CEO of Genesis Metals, which can be traded as GIS on the TSX Venture and as GGISF on the OTC. Thanks, Brian, for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me back again. I appreciate it.
Well, you've done a lot over the past few months, and most significantly, congratulations on a significant financing which takes Genesis forward with the exploration. Talk to us about the Genesis Metals exploration program and the recent financing and the shareholders, the very intelligent shareholders that have recently come into the company to help support it.
Certainly, Jeff. We were very fortunate in attracting. I'll start off with the financing and then describe the company if you like. It's probably easier that way. We've been working on the project for approximately 18 months since we acquired it in early 2016, and had outlined quite a comprehensive exploration program. We were able to close a $4 million Canadian financing. And we were able to attract some very, very high-profile investors, the likes of Eric Sprott, Gold 2000 from Switzerland, US Global from Texas, as well as two Quebec sovereign funds, CDEX and SDVJ. And certainly, probably the higher profile for most of your listeners would be a Cisco, who have taken a stake in the financing and now are shareholders of Genesis Metals. The $4 million is, I think it's going to be very interesting as we spend the money this year. We have drilling currently underway on the property. We're focused really on a very, very prospective part of Quebec. And for most of your listeners, they may be aware that Quebec is probably one of the preeminent jurisdictions in the world for mineral exploration at the present time. Very, very positive environment in terms of government support, community support, and all the things necessary for successful exploration. We're in the Chibougamau area, perhaps a belt that is not as well known as most of the better known belts such as Timmins, Val-d'Or, and so on. It has had a long history of exploration. It's been the site of numerous copper and copper-gold deposits and mining of those deposits. We were, as I mentioned, fortunate to enter into an arrangement to acquire the Chevrier project 100% by way of a merger with a smaller company who held the project. And the properties are located approximately 35 kilometers to the south of Chibougamau. We have excellent infrastructure. We can drive right to the property. We have an airport that services the region with daily flights to Montreal, the largest city in Quebec. And so, as I said, infrastructure is excellent. We're in the midst of the first phase of a 10,000-meter drill program. And that phase of the first phase of 5,000 meters is due to be completed later this week or early next week. We plan to take an approximately a 1 month break. And this may not come as a surprise to many of your listeners. The assaying turnaround is proving to be challenging just about for every junior in Canada at the present time. I think the labs have they rolled back in terms of their capacity with the downturn in the industry over the last few years, and have perhaps been caught flat-footed in terms of demand. So we anticipate having assays back before we start the second phase, which is slated for late September, early October, and that will be another 5,000-meter program.
So Brian, could you highlight some of and emphasize some of the participants and some of, one of the things that's so interesting is the amount of due diligence and the geological expertise that these shareholders also have. I was wondering if you could maybe highlight that.
Certainly. I think potentially, each of the significant shareholders that I've mentioned will be known to your listeners. Certainly a Cisco perhaps in the news very, very many times with some significant acquisitions, consolidation of smaller companies and projects in Eastern Canada principally, and a very, very successful investment strategy. And this, I think, basically speaks to the merit of our project, that we've been able to attract the likes of a Cisco as shareholders. Certainly, US Global is known to many of your listeners, Gold 2000 from Switzerland. So we have a diverse range of new shareholders. And certainly the fund, the peoples representing these funds are very, very astute geologists. And obviously, I think we have a project and a management team that appeals to them in terms of their investment in our company. So I think we are very fortunate to have a new slate of shareholders on our roster. And I certainly would like to just also mention that in terms of local Quebec support, I've mentioned CDEX and SDBJ. They came in for about maybe 5% of the financing, or currently own about 5% of the stock of Genesis. But very, 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 very experienced investment fund managers, lots of experience in the Quebec scene, and we're very, very pleased and very fortunate to have them as shareholders as well.
So, Brian, we have a 10,000 meter drill program that's fully funded. And you mentioned that you're going to do a second phase, so another 5,000 meters, maybe at the end of September, October. So it seems that there's going to be a good amount of news flow for this company going into the end of 2017, going into 2018.
That's correct, Jeff. Yes, we expect assay news flow probably, extending well into the end of the year and perhaps into January. We're fingers crossed. We're hopeful that the turnaround time for assaying stays, realistic. We're allocating approximately 3 to 4 weeks turnaround, and I think that's going to be realistic. So we'll see. In addition to just in terms of the scope of what we're doing in the 5,000 meters, the first phase that we're just completing now. Approximately 3,000 meters of that total will be committed to the main zone, which is one of 3 target areas that we're focusing on the property. The main zone has been the scene of, or the site of several earlier resource estimates. There was a compliant 43-101 resource estimate put out in 2010. It was not the aspect that attracted us to the property. We saw significant potential. We're looking at an approximately 100 square kilometer property package, a very significant land position along a deformation corridor that is proving to be very, very significant in terms of the number of gold showings and potential deposits. Our challenge is to understand what controls the mineralization and to move the resources that we have on the project to a compliant situation with an update. Probably later next year is our best estimate at this stage. And I'll explain that a little later on, or I can go into it now in terms of the dynamics. As I mentioned, we have 3 zones. The south zone is best handled as a winter drill program. Part of that area is under a shallow lake, and we expect that the most expedient way to drill that target will be in the winter. So that is being deferred until the coming winter. Most of our drilling for these 2 phases currently are allocated towards the main zone, testing new exploration targets on the property, and a zone called the East Zone in the far northeastern corner of the property, which had been worked by the likes of Falconbridge back in the 1980s. And again, a very, very significant area of stripping had been completed by Falconbridge, and by stripping I mean the overburden has been removed to expose the bedrock, so you're better able to identify what the rocks are and any signs of alteration. So we've been doing trenching of exploration targets. We've been drilling new holes. We've been resampling historic core, and we have about 78,000 meters of historic core available to us. And all this is going through the assay labs as we speak. So consequently, we have a significant number of samples, and we expect the assay disclosure and press releases will extend well into January at this time.
And Brian, I want to emphasize to the listeners that Quebec, from a jurisdictional standpoint, is getting a lot of attraction, as we've seen with these significant shareholders and supporters. Quebec is there's a lot of benefits for exploring in Quebec. Also, where you are in Quebec, in the Fancamp deformation zone, we've seen a major producer, Iamgold, making a major commitment into that area, which is only 15 kilometers southwest of this project. So I was wondering if you could maybe highlight what makes Genesis and this area so unique to investors right now.
I think the simple answer, Jeff, is the fact that it has been a greenstone belt that's been largely overlooked. I use the expression, it's the poor cousin to the more famous belts, such as Val-d'Or, Timmins, and Red Lake, or Kirkland Lake as well. And consequently, it hasn't seen the same level of exploration that we saw in the 90s, going into the 2000s, and it's missed out on that wave of exploration interest. I think as companies such as Integra in the Val-d'Or camp, and Integra may be well known to your listeners, what they've done is taken the historic data in an area that has huge amounts of historic data, and they've spent the time putting the pieces together to understand what goes on, and hence they've been able to significantly improve and extend the life, potentially put a new mine plan around an existing past producing asset. I think what's happened in the Fancamp deformation zone, in the corridor that hosts Chevrier, is that there's been a lot of drilling, but there hasn't been a lot of exploration. In other words, people have drilled holes, but they haven't taken the time to analyze the data, and that's what we've done. We've actually built three-dimensional geological models for each of the main zone, the south zone, and the east zone. So we better understand what the deposit looks like in 3 dimensions. That helps us understand the controls, what controls the mineralization, why is the gold where it is, and what do we have to look for to help us, sort of direct us towards potential extensions or expansion potential along the mineralized trends. Quebec, I think, is also it's a very, very favorable jurisdiction, as you said. We see a lot of the traditional Canadian producers, such as Iamgold, Kinross, and others, who have gone overseas, looking for perhaps greener fields, if I can use that term, in terms of their investment ideals for gold projects. They're refocusing their attention back on Canada. And Iamgold, as you mentioned, has optioned the Monster Lake property, which is approximately 15 kilometers to the southwest of us. We understand that they're spending about $2 million this year on that particular property and potentially moving towards an initial resource estimate for the property. Having a major in a belt is always a very good thing, and it certainly highlights the fact that even from a major's investment criteria perspective, that they see this camp as potentially being of significance, and we're very happy to have them as neighbors in the belt.
Brian Groves, CEO of Genesis Metals, which can be traded as GIS on the TSX Venture and as GGISF on the OTC. You can get more info and see more of the exploration data at genesismetalscorp.com. Thanks, Brian, for being here with us today, and it's a quite exciting time. You're drilling now in Quebec, 100% owned project, the Chevrier gold deposit. Thanks for being here with us today, Brian.
Thanks very much, Jeff, for hosting me. Thank you.